Welcome to Post Break. My name is Chris Peterson. I'm head of innovation at PNYA and chair of its Education and Events Committee, and I work with Dungeon Beach Post. Today's session is called The New Wave, the entertainment industry after Netflix Warner Brothers. Now to introduce our moderator, she's CEO of PNYA Post and Head of Government Affairs at the PNYA. Please welcome Yana Collins-Lehman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Chris, for keeping Post Breaks alive and well through all of the volatility over the past many years. And thank you, everyone, for coming. So good to see so many friends. I pitched this panel idea to the Education Committee when news of this potential sale of Warner Brothers to Netflix broke. It was around the night of our holiday party at Spin, and I was so glad to be on my way to one of our gatherings because I knew the most interesting takes on the news would be at this party. And so the guys I asked to be on this panel in this conversation were the first people I wanted to hear from because they've been around through our industry's many highs and lows, and they've owned and operated businesses. They are all brilliant and hilarious and successful in their own ways. I'll let them introduce ourselves. I'll let them introduce themselves quickly, and then we'll get into it. So Jeff Roth was at Focus in New York when I was the post coordinator on Mira Nair's Vanity Fair, and made sure he got the DVDs he needed every night. You guys remember DVDs? Those were the days. Anyway, and so then, Jeff, what did you get up to the following 20 years after we met?
A little bit of trouble here and there. I spent a long time at Focus. I was there till around end of 2013 into 2014. Then I oversaw production at Post Factory that became Sim New York. Had some fun building some stuff there, making some friends, getting my hands dirty. Ended up going on to Netflix, where I eventually became the VP of post production. And then I took over a team called Production Strategy and Operation, which was production technology and mergers and acquisitions, baseline strategy for production and post.
Excellent. Pete Conlon, acting chair of the PNYA, who I met when Travana was at 1619 Broadway, and he owned 1619. It was on the sixth floor.
Yep, that's where we started.
Yeah. And I would steal the snacks and watch the Thanksgiving Day parade from there. And then what happened, Pete?
Well, right now I'm the head of sales over at Goldcrest Post in New York. And I'm on the board of two software startups called Showrunner and ProdPro. And in general, have been working in the New York post-production scene for 35 years with just about everybody on this call. So it's fun to see everybody.
Excellent. Now, Tom Hall runs the Montclair Film Festival, is an avid writer and music lover, and also programs the two movie theaters in Montclair and exists in a wormhole that has 48 hours in a day and not 24. And he doesn't sleep, and no one understands how he does so much stuff. And I'm so happy to have you here. Tom, what else should we know about you before we get into this?
I am obsessed with sleep. I have no idea what you're talking about. Thank you for having me, everyone. Yes, I work in the nonprofit film sector. So we own and operate a six-screen art house cinema and a three-screen cinema, both nonprofit theaters in Montclair, New Jersey, called the Claridge and the Bellevue. This is my heading into my 12th year now at the Montclair Film Festival in 2026. Prior to that, for 10 years, ran the Sarasota Film Festival in Sarasota, Florida, programmed at Newport, Rhode Island, and at the Nantucket Film Festivals for many years. Worked at the Hamptons International Film Festival, and for 3 years was the director of new media at Bravo and the Independent Film Channel back when they were one company in the late 90s. So I am old. Other than that, just proud to be here and excited to meet all of you and talk about this important topic.
Thank you. So I think to get our arms around the massiveness of the topic, let's just assume it happens. I don't really so much want to be like, maybe someone else will do it, maybe, let's just say this happens. So, then what? I'll go to you first, Jeff Roth. Like, New York is just kind of getting up off its knees after the strikes. Our tax credit is cooking. It's definitely attracting jobs. We're in recovery mode. So assuming this happens, it's happened. How do you see it impacting the landscape? Let's focus on, specifically New York, post-production, production. What do you think it'll look like out here?
My crystal ball. Good question. Well, I think first of all, overall, everyone, all the media when they were announcing, trying to make the acquisition was like, oh my God, the sky is falling. It's the worst thing for entertainment, which is a bit insane because the only reason Netflix would buy that is to obviously get the library, but to produce more content. When you have 82 to $82 billion sitting on your balance sheet, you need to make that money and recoup. So how do you recoup? You make more content. So ultimately, where the content lands and is produced, good question. But ultimately, I believe overall, it's gonna, they're gonna want to sort of exploit prequels, sequels, spin-offs, as well as obviously new content. Um, so, in terms of New York, I believe it should ultimately, we should see a rise with the tax credit here. Historically, Netflix, years ago, they weren't as concerned necessarily on budget overruns, but as years went on, they started being a little bit more fiscally conservative in terms of making sure the money got on the screen. So ultimately, what that means to me is, New York with a great tax credit and a good post-tax credit should ultimately see an increase in volume. Not to mention, the new studio in New Jersey. They're not planning on building post facilities down there. So ultimately, if you want to sort of like get the whole bundle, I have a feeling you'll end up sort of seeing directors who want to sort of like directors and showrunners who ultimately dip their toe in the New York market. Maybe at first they're sort of coerced to, and then they find out they like it here and love it here, and want to build a team here and maybe move here. Who knows? So long run, I see positive. A creative value for New.
And Pete, you've done a lot of work over the years with both Netflix and Warner Brothers. What are your thoughts? Do you think facilities will be busy? Do you think that, like, if you're someone just entering into the business, if you're someone just coming into the post-production industry, do you think this looks good for you, bad for you?
I think, the thing that we deal with as, say vendors or post companies or like individuals trying to find work and keep steady work. The biggest challenge that we have is when there's some kind of disruption or uncertainty in the marketplace, like the strikes that we went through, just recently, the writer strikes from 2008 and 2009, the events of September 11th and 2001. Like, after all of these moments, we've always hit these sort of rock bottom times of there's no work at all for the whole community. And it's usually right at the stretch of like a pretty nice run. And we always then read in the trades, okay, the strike is settled, right? Great. That was like 2 years ago. So everyone thought like, great, we'll go right back to work. But it doesn't really work that way. It's a longer lead time to get up and running. So as things restart, we hate any kind of noise or uncertainty in the marketplace that will prevent productions from starting because a lot of times, studios or producers may or may not want to greenlight a show. And then if there's any kind of noise, they're like, well, we'll just kick the can and we'll shoot it in the fall, or we'll do whatever, So even the Skydance acquisition of Paramount, that whole type of merger thing, that really held up a lot of stuff as we came out of the strike. that finally got settled. We saw some liquidity come into the markets, and like the fall got sort of busy, and now we're looking at a really good spring. So for me, like sitting here, when it's like all of a sudden there's all this talk of Warner and Netflix and merging, everyone is just sort of collectively like, oh man, not another weird thing going on maybe that's gonna hold up three HBO shows, right? There's another season of Task, I think. Gilded Age has another season. We're all sort of waiting for those things to start. And the last thing we want is some kind of merger or acquisition to disrupt that. So we always get a little nervous. Jeff is right. They're not buying it to not make stuff, right? Netflix is buying it because they're trying to grow and they need more channels to come in, and maybe they'll even make sub channels on their own platform, right? Maybe there'll be an HBO subscription on Netflix, right? That they're already doing that in some of their outside regions. But that's from an overall thing, when you talk to the unions, when you talk to the facilities, we need like a little 3 to 4 year run here where we can all work. Everybody can
Yeah.
make some money again. The facilities can make some money again so that we can, the other thing that comes out of disruptions is there's usually some kind of technology shift, right? And we all need a little bit of capital in the company so we can really dig into and deploy this stuff. Right now, we've all got some new AI tool that helps us conform or helps us cut out mats or helps us cut dialogue or helps us do something, but like not a lot of post companies are developing and writing their own AI tools. We're sort of just
Mm.
grabbing what we can as we go, and that if we all had a run of a year or two of profitability and we could put some money in our coffers, it lets us grow.
Well, I thought it was a good sign that the unions are like starting to negotiate early, right? The agreements are up this summer, and I thought it was a really good sign. At least they get that, like that the potential volatility slows down all production. And I also thought it was a good sign. I'll go to you, Tom. I want to hear what you think about this, that Ted Sarandos suddenly committed to 45-day windows. I wonder if you believe that, think it's a good sign, and then if you would just address the matter of, a kind of a common reaction to the news was that it would be really bad for cinema, really bad for exhibition. Everything would now be television. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so strangely, our cinemas have a good relationship with Netflix. I just want to start with that. We're one of the few art house cinemas that works directly with them on their theatrical slate. So this year, as an example, this fall, we had a theatrical exclusive in our area on Frankenstein, Nouvelle Vague, Train Dreams, Left-Handed Girl, Jay Kelly, Wake Up Dead Man. All of these films played in our theater prior to being on the Netflix service, and we have worked with their team to get those films theatrical attention in our cinemas. So as a non-big chain who wants 60-day windows and is living in, and they own real estate all over the country and are looking at 3,000 screens that they own or however many thousand screens that they own as a company. I think there's a lot of room and opportunity for nonprofit cinemas in particular to be nimble and work with a 45-day window and be getting those films when other people are turning them down or feel like those windows are not enough for what their goals are as a corporation. We don't have that problem, and it's been a real boon to us. Frankenstein was one of the top grossing films in our cinema this year. It did really well. Wake Up Dead Man did really well for us. It was in the top 10 in our cinema this year. So people want to see those movies on the big screen. And I don't know how Ted feels about that because I've never met or talked to Ted about it. But the fact that he was saying that he wanted a 45-day window for Warner Brothers, I took as a really positive sign. The other thing I would just wanted to hope that they will double down on is the creative team at Warner Brothers. Pam Abdi, Mike DeLuca, who have had an incredible year of producing hits. They just got 30 Oscar nominations today for their work. They set a record with Sinners for Oscar nominations. Netflix has never had a Best Picture winner. If they really want to get serious about award season, we work with their team for the festival side. We work with the awards team to bring films like we brought Jay Kelly to the festival, Wake Up Dead Man to the festival. Left-Handed Girl, et cetera, et cetera. But the opportunity to work with people at that budget level creatively and deliver theatrical into Netflix is, I think, a really big opportunity for them. I know they're looking at the data on their most watched films. I'm sure series and TV is separate, but the deal that they just did with Sony and other companies is a sign that I think they recognize a theatrical window drives people to an exclusive window on the Netflix service. All of their big hit films, basically, that get most viewings are, young people films that have had theatrical windows that had a lot of marketing behind them to get kids excited about watching them in a movie theater and then come over to Netflix. And I'm wondering if they see that and think we could do this for what they're doing at Warner Brothers as well. We can take library titles and convert them into hits. We can take theatrical and turn it into hits. They've got Superman, they've got DC, they've got a Lord of the Rings, they've got a bunch of IP that would translate over as well. So I don't think they would be divesting from, $100 million opening weekend in the United States, global reach theatrically with all these films. It would be nuts, I think, to buy that asset at that price and then drive that into the ground. So I do think it's a real possibility that it would be a net positive for cinemas to have one touch point. And then if they could expand out and maybe move some of the titles that are, for the service only, that are art house, in our case, hits, Ballad of a Small Player, House of Dynamite, things like that, give them more attention theatrically. It could be a real boon for Netflix brand among the industry. And I think they want to have a higher profile and more respect as a film company in the awards categories, et cetera, theatrically, et cetera. So I see it as a smart move if I were Netflix. I see that as a smart move on their part. The proof will be in the pudding about where they end up with that strategy and how much they believe in it. But I don't think you throw away that creative talent, that history, and those opportunities globally. That just fits in right with what Netflix, I think, wants to be doing. So I'm hopeful that I'm relatively bullish on the merger as long as they keep the creatives that I like and those relationships that I like, and the things that we see being successful at the cinema going. If that's what they want to do, if that's the strategy, then I am all for it. If the strategy is the opposite, let's kill this competitor and take over and put everything on the service and theaters are dead. Obviously, that's a whole other thing. But all the signals are the other way, I think. If I'm just thinking strategically, the signals are the other way. But let's see.
That makes sense. And like you said, Jeff, like you brought up the balance sheet, like you have $82 billion on your balance sheet. Like, how do you don't clean that up by shutting everything down?
Exactly. And I mean, I'd agree with Tom again. Like, I think Ted was getting a lot, and there's a lot of noise. So sort of acquiescing to the 45-day window. Ultimately, you know, he loves film and he loves going to the movies. He really loves that experience. But ultimately, from a business perspective, sort of releasing your best content and having to have that gap between your primary streaming service and the theatrical was a bit in tension always. Now this is the perfect opportunity to have both arms. Warner Brothers does what they do. They can do, those billion-dollar franchise movies that feed into the platform, keep the 45-day window, and then also, as you said, exploit some of the library content or other content that doesn't really get out there as much. On the content front, I mean, again, to make money at this, you're going to need a big creative team that knows what they're doing. So, to me, things like the big creative roles, the Mike DeLucas and stuff at Warner's, sort of need to stay intact to sort of produce the volume and content that they're going to be producing. I think there's probably, I think ultimately the production and post business grows. Content stays sort of the same or even possibly expands. But then there's going to probably be redundancies and repetitive reductions in sort of like their streaming staff. I mean, they're not going to keep HBO Max platform alive. They're going to put it on Netflix platform. I mean, not necessarily the same. I mean, I don't know if they're going to put it on under the same shingle, but ultimately from an operations perspective. So there's going to be sort of some savings and efficiencies of economy there, which is not what we're talking about here. But in terms of the ultimate goal of how does it affect the outside industry, it's going to grow. They're going to pump money into it because ultimately you want to get more users, higher average revenue per user, and sort of like you're also trading in. You got to remember that Warner's probably licenses, I don't know, 10, 10, $12 billion a year of content to other streaming services. Doesn't all go onto Max. So some of that's licensed. Ultimately, that'll sort of like be, I'm assuming they'll want to reserve that for themselves. So ultimately that revenue goes away. You also need to replace that. So that's on top of your acquisition price. So there's other economics there. But ultimately, if you have a sort of like a annuity based, a subscription service, you can replace that easily. You get enough content and you have all this great content on that people need to see. And again, theatrical big tent poles build buzz. And then there's other, they sort of got out of the indie business, but there are smaller films that they have made over the years that absolutely could be done theatrically. And if you don't actually have to have a theatrical distribution team at Netflix per se, and it sort of switches over to Warner's, it becomes sort of a shingle with a pipeline to push that stuff out. So to me, that's good opportunity to sort of like drive eyes to the service.
And I don't totally understand, but so when Amazon acquired or bought whatever they did with MGM, that didn't feel like a lot of jobs were lost. It feels to me like both of those companies are operating separately and together. But then when Skydance bought Paramount, it was a bloodletting. There was like thousands of jobs lost. So I think this like third iteration, reading the tea leaves, I guess I just see it a little more probably like Amazon, MGM, right? A tech company buying a big
Yes.
classic prestige movie studio, all of whom are very good at what they do. It would make no sense to have there be like that kind of bloodletting.
Yeah. Skydance was a production company that bought a studio that was not operating
Right.
at a profit. So there was a lot of just sort of like old studio baggage. Again, I don't know exactly sort of all the numbers of the layoffs, but it was just sort of cleaning up to sort of get operations clean and reinvent the studio for the next generation, which is again not necessarily always a bad thing. I mean, I worked at Netflix. I'm sorry, at Focus and Universal, and there's a lot of sort of like old ways of doing things that should be changed and should be made current and more modern. But that being said, again, I think sort of a legacy studio like Warner's, there's a lot of good stuff too. A lot, content production. I mean, as a matter of fact, some of the best content on Apple or Amazon or Netflix comes out of Warner Production. I mean, it does today. There's a ton of content sort of being pushed out of there because they know what they're doing. Honestly, the hardest thing about the business that we're in today is I don't think there's enough producers and sort of like content people to make the quantity of content that should be made at a high level. I mean, there's just not enough good ideas and good ideas, new ideas, people to execute on those. So I think ultimately, sort of, I think it'll sort of right size itself, but then ultimately it's going to grow year over year. And I think back to, I just want to touch on something Pete said. It's super interesting. It's like you come to these technology inflection points. I mean, Pete's done it over the years. Again, like sort of like 1619, getting into the digital dailies game. Then we're gonna open a film lab, but they sort of got into the dailies game, did it well. It was an add-on service and a feed-in, and it made a lot of sense. Or Bling, that was bought by Sim, digital dailies again. So there are these things, and now becomes less of these big brick and mortar facilities and more of pipeline-based facilities where you can move the work around the world pretty easily. So to me, for New York Post and VisFX and whatever, I mean, I think it needs fluidity and innovation to sort of operate successfully and be able to make a profit. You don't want to have a 300 square foot server room at New York rent. You want to put it in New Jersey and only pay for your talent there and sort of on your books and sort of like sort of becomes like run the capex versus opex model and sort of optimize what are you offering to Warner's and Netflix and the other studios and sort of like getting really smart about that versus doing things in a legacy way. So I think that's really important. Sort of as we go into this next wave, Pete mentioned AI. There's a ton of people building that sort of stuff. A lot of it's smoke and mirrors, but there are, with a little bit of elbow grease and some, getting your head around it, there's going to be opportunities to adopt things and not go, oh my God, I'm taking away this end of my business. Well, it's gonna, yeah, but it's gonna this part of my business is more profitable, so I'm gonna cut this part of my business off, do this more profitably, and sort of just change how I'm approaching things. So we're at this. It's a bit of a weird time right now in post with that sort of thing. But I think we're going to sort of see the trends, and sort of read the tea leaves and sort of like figure out how this is going to come out of the woodwork and come out of the wash. Because talent is talent. Ultimately, you need talent. New York's got a lot of talent.
If you guys were just breaking into the biz and you were your like 20-year-old selves today, what what job would you get? What would you go after?
I'd go into finance.
Something not in post.
Yeah, something
Come
not in
on.
post.
Come on, Jeff. Get out of here.
Ultimately, so it's funny. I couldn't sort of build I couldn't build the stuff I built at Netflix without the years of production behind under my belt in terms of like understanding how things work. But that being said, I would definitely go into something more in the sort of tech sphere, software development. I hate to use the AI, but we were using a lot of stuff that they call AI is actually just machine learning and computer vision, which honestly, I've been doing for years. So I definitely sort of going into that sort of end of the business because I think it's really interesting and there's a lot of cool stuff.
So not post accounting then? Sure you were going to
I mean, accounting in general, honestly, is one of those great. Again, like you're always gonna need people who understand accounting and understand finances. I think that's going to change. It should change.
Pete, what about you? Would you start another company? Would you start
Uh,
another
I
offline
think
company?
I think, to echo one thing Jeff said was, artists are the most important part of our whole industry, right? Like someone has to come up with the concept of a script, right? Someone has to shoot it, someone has to direct it, someone has to act in it, someone has to color correct it, somebody has to mix it, somebody has to edit it, and a post facility or a post business or post production software should the whole goal really is just to connect those artists as seamlessly as possible so that they have the most time and the most efficiency so they can play around with their project and make it something great because a production day costs so much money. It's art with a lot of pressure on it. And so everything that we think about as we build out new companies and we work on new software should really be streamlining the process. And a lot of us have really worked on that stuff through our careers, right? A lot cutting digitally, shooting digitally, sharing files digitally, collaborative tools, doing visual effects faster. All of these things we're trying to streamline stuff. And so as there's less, importance on how much equipment costs, how big the places can be, and there's much more importance put on artist to artist. I think if you're starting out, the best thing that you can do is doing the artistic tools that are needed to tell a story, write something, shoot something, color correct it yourself, cut it yourself, display it for a whole bunch of people. We always tell the best filmmakers that all of us have ever worked with, we all know one thing about them. They screen their stuff constantly in all different phases of their project. The most uncomfortable times that they're in the middle of the project, there they are screening it for an actress, screening it for an actor, screening it for their fellow directors, And the young filmmakers we come across, the first timers, they're like, we can't screen this right now. It's not good enough. It's not ready. It's like, no, you have to screen it. You have to do it. You have to sit there and display your stuff and feel the pain and the sheer terror that you have when someone else is watching it and they're not laughing at your joke and they're not ducking when, I don't know, there's some kind of action going on. And so for people just starting, like it's always best to do that stuff. And when you do get a job and you are at a studio, when you are just like Jeff and I, when we had our first jobs at Good Machine or Shooting Gallery, whatever, the other people that are there, the older people that we are now, they love to hear like, oh, I'm shooting this weekend. Oh, I'm writing a script with my friends. Oh, can I borrow a camera? Oh, can I use some editing room time at night? We always say yes, right? Because that's all we want. It's a young person's game. If you're gonna shoot all night, work during the day, and cut all weekend, like that's sort of what it takes. Every successful filmmaker that we've ever worked with, like that's what they're doing. They're always writing one, shooting one, cutting one, selling one, right? That's the Spielberg motto. But so if you're just starting out, like do it, use all your tools.
Tom, I know if you were just starting out, you'd be in a band and just stay in the band and like not sell out. But aside from that, what do you think you would do?
I'd like to do. I've always wanted to try to do acquisitions.
Um,
I think that would be for a programmer that's like a natural sort of parallel fit, but it's the other side of the coin, I guess. So for me, that would be fun.
and the other thing I wanted
Editing,
to ask you,
actually, editing would be kind of fun too. I feel like story,
it's
understanding
not
story
fun.
structure. I know, but understanding story structure and
The
being able to
most
play with
depressed people in
footage
the
and
world are editors.
I have a lot of friends who are editors. They're lovely people, and I just am fascinated by that process because I think it's really how the film gets to its final stage and is made. Really,
I want to answer some of these questions that people are posting, but I just wanted to ask Tom, in the theory of like streamlining, being nimble, I think there's so much to that, like as a business. And I do think following up on what you were saying, like why an independent cinema is less vulnerable to all of this volatility than say AMC or Regal or a publicly traded massive corporation with billions of dollars in real estate to contend with is exactly that. I mean, we're small and mighty in our movie theaters, and it's basically you run it. You get to make all of the decisions. You're not beholden. I mean, you have a board, but you don't listen to them, and you can just like do what you want, and make the decisions that you want to make. And I think that what that's a big part of how we know it's going to be successful. And it sounds like not unlike post facilities or anything else, like cinemas are the same.
yeah, I think the like scale can be a problem. We did just add a cinema. Like we're doubling. Literally doubled down on movie theaters this year at Montclair Films. So we added a second cinema that we refurbished, and we invested a bunch of money in getting it up to speed after being closed since 2017. So we opened two cinemas that were closed. We opened the first one in 2021, and then our second cinema this past year, 2025. And we get emails and phone calls all the time from all over New Jersey, like, "Hey, do you want to come to our town and open our cinema?" And it's like, the scale does is I don't want to be at that scale. We like to be like at a manageable scale, I think, so that we can be flexible, like you said, and we don't have a lot of power, but we get great results for what we have, and people notice and want to play their films with us, and we curate it. We don't like just say yes to everything. Like we're not giving 9 screens to this and 5 screens to that just because it's coming out. Like we say no. We have a lot of flexibility to say no to things that we don't want to show, and um, I do think a lot of this media consolidation. One of the challenges we do face, and I reflecting on what Peter was saying earlier, was there is a shortage of potentially of films coming down the pipe, like the investment in creating theatrical films overall, right? So that's the big worry with anything. Paramount, Skydance bought Paramount and promised, what was it, 15 films a year or something. They've never scaled. Skydance has never scaled to that level before as a company, and they're cutting back on that. And then they also have the TV side of it and the news side of it and all that. With what they're doing to manage, it just seems like a big lift for them. Whereas if you take in Warner Brothers and keep it, you're getting all that expertise and all that stuff, and figuring out synergy, sure, but you want to keep the ability to scale up immediately or stay at scale for Warner Brothers. I mean, they had what 10 number one films this year, or 7 or 8. It was like ridiculous. So that, I mean, like they had a huge amount of um, theatrical success and they were operating at probably maximum capacity for what you'd want to come. They had a movie a month. It felt like for a long time. So that's really where you want to be. So yeah, like we need more people investing in having big slates so that we have things to choose from. The more films we can show to audiences, the more chance they have to find something they're interested in, want to see, buy a ticket, and come to the movie theater. That's why you look at a multiplex with 20 screens and they're only showing 6 films. because everyone's got 4 or 5 screens and 9 showtimes an hour or whatever. It's crazy. So I think consumer choice has got to be a huge driver, and having opportunities to connect and invest in. I know it's not the trendy thing to talk about right now, but diversity is really important. I mean, Sinners has just got the #1 most Oscar nominations in history. That audience came out to see that movie like crazy, having opportunities for people, women directors. Gerwig's got the Narnia film coming out, like, having opportunity for people, creative people, to push boundaries and find new things in the industry is how new classics get made, how audiences fall in love with new films, how new audiences fall in love with films. So we have to have that choice as well. So scaling back and making it, a boring slate of movies with no volume is going to be a real problem. So I really hope that that's sort of the goal, that people reinvest and rethink sort of the political strategy behind their slates as well, because I think it's really important.
Excellent point. I'm going to read some of these questions. Carl, since Paramount is effectively out of the bidding for Warner, what would you maybe think they should do next to expand their Paramount Plus streaming service? Any ideas?
I have an answer for that to start. So my wife is IATSE in New York, in the wardrobe department, is working on a upcoming Paramount Plus / CBS series that's going to start production in the Q1 26. And the like I was just saying about them scaling up on the TV side and the series side, on the film side, Paramount really needs to scale up in terms of production. They don't have enough volume and content. I think they've been trying to figure out how to turn it into a mix of CBS and Paramount Studios for a long time as a company. So I think solving that problem and having, like I said, more volume and driving theatrical hits to their service and exclusively, and not leasing it to other companies for would be a really big help for them. Having exclusivity matters for their content. I think that's a really good.
Jeff?
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, yeah. I mean, producing good content at scale for a studio to hit targets is really hard. Netflix. I mean, early on when I got there, they kept on saying we're going to make this much content in this territory and this much content. We're going to do this, and time over time, they kept failing because the volumes were unrealistic in terms of the amount of content creators out there that can make that volume. But it does take strategy, and it does take a lot of the right heads together. Paramount did hire Cindy Holland, former head of content at Netflix, and she's great. That's for the Paramount Plus side. I'm not sure where it crosses over in terms of all content versus film and series. But I'm confident once she gets up and running, she's going to really start cranking out more content. I don't know exactly what their volume strategy is. Again, you can either make it yourself and throw money at it and build organically, which is what Netflix did, or you can buy. There's, I'm not sure what other big content engine out there makes a ton of sense for them. To me, I think it probably makes more sense to do it organically. And there's maybe a few smaller companies. I mean, a few smaller shingle companies that they could probably buy, but yeah, just having a strategy and going for it.
By Blumhouse. Horror cells. Justin Joseph Hall, editing is fun. Yes, we know. I was just joking. Editors are my favorite people in the world. I just like to tease them. Evan Anthony, NYC needs documentaries to come back. The doc and doc series is still hurting bad, with PBS basically done and the rest not buying much besides true crime and A-lister topics. True. Everyone agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, can I just say something about theatrical for documentaries is, extremely challenging. Audiences are not driven out, but there's also no advertising and marketing behind a lot of the documentaries. And true crime gets that bump on the streaming services and on the platforms. Celebrity biopics, obviously, if Billie Eilish tweets about her or Taylor Swift tweets about her upcoming Disney Plus four-part Eras Tour documentary. She crashes Disney Plus, right? So you need to have some sort of awareness behind those movies, and with people divesting from theatrical in those and not putting money behind them, it is extremely challenging from a theatrical point of view. But I do still think the form itself is really thriving. The list that came out again, for, not to the Oscars and everything, but that list is really strong in terms of great films. The theatrical run that Film Forum here in New York did of My Undesirable Friends, which didn't get nominated, but is a 5.5 hour documentary on Russian journalists in the lead up to the Ukraine war. That is an incredible film that ran for weeks and weeks and weeks at Film Forum and was like doing great business theatrically at that theater. We ran it at our cinema as well, where it didn't do as well, but it came on the tail of like a 6 week run in New York, so I understand that. But it's there's a lot of great stuff out there. I do think the theatrical side of it needs to be reimagined, and I do think awareness has to be a driver for all that. If people could do if our companies could do a better job of promoting those films, I think there's success to be had there. People are, especially now. I mean, when the if Michael Moore made an ice doc tomorrow, I think it would be quite popular. So there is a lot of stuff out there that could be done.
Totally. Eric, how can smaller NYNJ post companies engage the larger studios for potential opportunities, particularly as post-production workflows become more remote friendly and local tax credits seem to prioritize larger legacy businesses? Is there an avenue to assist small businesses?
I can answer that, I think. Having started and managed smaller companies in a landscape that was predominantly, dominated by large labs, right? So when I started Orbit Digital or 1619, there was Technicolor, there was Deluxe, there was Magno, there was DuArt, there was sort of the places that chemically processed film were sort of the hubs and the big places. And as a small company, one of the better strategies is to first engage all of the other larger companies in your own community and sort of learn and understand from them. So like for us, we were like really good at like making the Avid work, or we were really good at managing digital dailies, which the bigger places weren't quite ready yet, right? And so we would reach out and we'd say, hey, Technicolor, let's meet, let's have lunch. Do you have a show that may be utilizing some of these new technologies? Maybe there's a way to work together. And through working with Technicolor, then we ended up meeting Jeff Roth, who's producing a show at Universal, or Sean Cooney, who's producing a show at Miramax, or whatever. And you start to meet the clients and you get into the community that way. Because when you're small, it's not so much that the tax credits are being built for large businesses. They're being built to just sort of generate work. They support all the work. It's what your challenge is. You just don't have access to the decision makers at the studios because you just don't know them yet. And so engage with all of them. And when you do get a project, really take your time and go see the people at the studios. Spend time with them, take them out to dinner. Create a very stupid topic at NAB and then invite everybody to dinner, right, Jeff?
Exactly.
And have some fun with it. But that is a good strategy for small business and just independent people trying to get work. If you called up Goldcrest and said, I'm a young editor, I have a project I'm looking to do, could I come down and meet with you guys? They would say yes. If you called up, any of the companies, Harbor, Company 3, any of the established places, people are always willing to share. And you just have to sort of be aggressive about that when you're small and weasel your way in, so to speak.
And I was gonna say, one of the great things about smaller vendors versus sort of traditional vendors or larger vendors is speed and agility, flexibility. So yeah, I mean, you have to have some chops, but honestly, sort of once you sort of can sort of do that, one small thing right. Again, maybe as a part of a project, you'll start to meet the talent who makes these decisions at the studios and elsewhere. I was going to say there's the studio contacts, and then there's the creative content contacts, whether it's the director or the editor or the cinematographer. That it's also ultimately has the hand in making these decisions. It's not always at the studio. So ultimately, I met a ton of contacts from a production or a post person that said, "Hey, meet so and so. They're really great. Oh, I've never heard of them before." And some of the best contacts I've had over the last 30 years came from those introductions and meetings. So
Thank you. Alex Halpern, I have a question for Tom. Hi, Alex Halpern. How does Tom feel about the potential that more people stay home versus going to the theaters while art house films survive the multiplex preserves the collective experience for filmgoers in urban areas? Do people that don't have access to the local art house miss out on the theatrical experience and film going becomes more exclusive rather than more accessible?
There's a yeah, so I'm on the board of the Art House Convergence, which is a national organization of art house cinemas. So they're all over the country and more broadly available than people think. There's an art house cinema or two in all 50 states. You can, if someone obviously that doesn't mean you can drive all the way across Texas to go one, but um, they're out there. And I do, absolutely think that people are staying home more often than not, or waiting for high ticket priced movies to come to their local home streaming service instead of going to the cinema to see it. No one is putting up numbers like pre-COVID at a movie theater, no matter where they are. So the business is definitely down from the 2018, 2019 highs in terms of theatrical box office. We just see that year over year. No one even bothers putting up pre-2020 numbers anymore to make a comparison because it's pretty useless to do. So that's certainly a part of the reality. So the question is, what's available to you as a cinema, knowing that that's the case, creating a business around a lower ceiling, and then trying to figure out how you can eventize films, whether it be through a huge movie that everyone wants to go see and that has an incredible marketing campaign behind it and it's good and ends up driving people through word of mouth and expectation into a cinema, down to having a Saturday Q&A with a filmmaker who's coming through town, and you can create an event and an in-person event out of it. So I think there's a lot of that. And I would say big multiplexes are not really, I mean, yes, they create capacity in big cities, but the thing that people are talking about now in New York in particular is repertory film. The Metrograph Film Forum, IFC Center, the Quad Film at Lincoln Center. People who are doing repertory screenings are killing it and doing a really great job and driving film culture, especially among younger audiences who are coming out in droves to see film projected on film at rep screenings. It's a real thing. And it's not just New York. LA has the same. A lot of major cities have a big repertory audience as well. So I'd love to see more cinemas getting creative with rep screenings and getting younger audiences excited about going to see classic films and getting more into film culture in general. I think that's a big part of the lift as well. So there's still lots of work to be done to bring people back. I do think, yes, there's a lot of content available at home. It's much cheaper, especially if you're a working family, as my family is. We went to go see Bone Temple last weekend. It was $120 with popcorn and tickets to go take a chance on, the 28 years later franchise. So, that's a risk most people don't want to take if they don't know they're going to love it, like a Barbie or a Wicked or something that they're really excited to see. So tentpoles really drive, I think, people making those kinds of decisions. And then people with disposable income, younger people who are more interested, have different priorities. So it's a diverse business still. And I think there's a lot of upside there for people I think the more you can provide, like I said, more choice that you can provide as a cinema, the more opportunity there is to bring in an audience.
Thanks, Tom. Meg's question: do you see crews getting smaller in attempt to save money with the use of AI?
Um, hmm, good question. I don't think I can see. I mean, maybe. I mean, again, like post. I mean, except on big tent poles, post crews are relatively small anyway. I think at facilities you'll see some roles replaced with some AI. I mean, there's really no reason. There's a ton of things you can do with AI that's faster and quicker than a human. But again, that'll get replaced. But you don't. Again, you replace one role so you can actually scale your volume. Ultimately, you want more volume, so it needs other roles. So ultimately, I don't see it necessarily over time, sort of ultimately making, again, a five-person crew, a three-person crew, forever. But again, I think things will shift and change as we go on.
I think it'll be more likely in the immediate sense to turn a 26-week post schedule into a 23-week post schedule,
Yeah,
but you still need the same amount of crew. They
yeah,
might not work as many weeks.
I mean, again, like as again, I think Peter was saying earlier, like ultimately, when I was building tools for efficiency at Netflix, and people were like, "Oh my God, it's going to take my job," and I'm like, "No, no, no. This is ultimately time is fungible. We're going to give more time. We're going to give more time to the editor, or give more time to color correction, or more time to sound, or more time to subtitling, or at the end of the day, we'll pull it early and release earlier. But ultimately, we have this 23 weeks. If you took 26 weeks and made it 23, that additional time you're saving is going to go somewhere. It's
Mhm.
someone more time. And there's a lot of things in, like people were saying regarding connecting all these people that are either in the same city or globally dispersed together and allowing them to work, quicker and more seamlessly. Ultimately, that's what we want, and we save time by sort of, using time to our advantage, chasing the globe, chasing time zones. If it's not just in New York. And really, that's hopefully going to give more time to the creative, so you can do a better job. If we're auto assembling the edit, that's not going to be what's going to go on air. It's going to give more time to watch the dailies and maybe rethink the scenes and rework it or throw it away. But ultimately, you want to replace sort of like busy work that takes real time and shave 10%, 20%, 30%. That's what you want to do to allow you to sort of, get, maybe I didn't have time to sort of do that final edit or remix that scene. Now I can. So that's what you want to do. Make the best content.
Yeah, and I think if you look through across time, each time we hit some new technology innovation, this was always the conversation, right?
Mhm.
Once we started cutting on the Avid, they're like, "Oh my God, editorial crews are going to shrink to nothing," and blah blah blah. And then what did we end up doing? We ended up making 60 versions per reel, instead of two, right? And we ended
Mhm.
up preview screening 10 times instead of two times. So, crews just kept growing, and we're going to shoot digitally. We're going to lose all the people to handle all this film on set, and we ended up with DITs and data wranglers and, all these other things and moving files around and shooting 3 times as much footage per day. So then we had more dailies operators and we needed more engineers to deal with all the different cameras and more camera companies making new things. So there's always fear that it's going to shrink. But if you look at the subscription of the unions and look at all the people and all the unions for all the trades, they have steadily increased, over the course of time since, let's say, if 1996 or 7 is sort of the beginning of a new era of using digital technologies for everything. We don't have less people working. So, um,
Great
like
point.
like Jeff said, there's hopefully it's just efficiency, so there's more time, to do the creative stuff.
I think visual effects, however, is an area that you're going to see some more major changes. You're going to sort of take those entry level jobs, your rotoscope and your paint and your basic stuff, and ultimately those will go away. But what does that mean? Does it mean you need less artists? No, it means I need more artists that are up here, not
Mhm.
the level. So how do you learn that stuff? Good question. It's a bit of a complex thing to sort of think about, but ultimately it's not going to go away. The vis effects, the need for visual effects is expanding. And while we're sort of like dealing with some of it with AI and automation, ultimately we still need more better artists. So back to your question about what would you do? Again, like I need artists that are trained as artists. Go to art school. Learn actually, how to paint and how to do visual design. And you need sort of all the sort of creative stuff.
Start apprenticing for the painter right now. Um, okay, we have time for a couple more questions. There was a question about, are any of you familiar with the new streaming service, The Network? It seems like they're doing the startup path for studio platform model. Do you think there's space for smaller studios, platforms in this landscape of mega studios? The Network is based out of New Haven currently.
I do know them. They're doing originals. They're doing original series at small scale with like I think monthly episodes, and they're not like doing where they put everything out at the same time. I think it's like a month, maybe it's weekly. But they my theory on all that is it is a business of hits. If you have a hit that everyone's
Mm.
talking about, you know, comes to your service to watch it, that's how you scale up that business. I think you know, if you're I don't know what their investment looks like or how much they're putting into them. The other big trend that's happening, I think, in Asia that's sort of slowly making its way this way is micro dramas and people, you know, making very short form content for social media and creating networks and original content that way. So that's another model as well of studios cranking that stuff out like crazy for that audience. So those are two definitely paths. I don't know if you're going to become a Paramount or Warner Brothers through that model, but there certainly is a production company a lot of possibility at that level. But I don't know about if it's scalable for like a studio platform.
Great. Rich and Carl together, what is the general opinion on all of the new studio lots being built? Netflix, Lionsgate, Paramount. Does this imply that there will be an increase of production and post in New York and New Jersey because these facilities are here? And Sunset Pier 94 production studios just opened this week in NYC.
Um, uh, ultimately, yeah, I believe yes. You know, when I was at Netflix, we shot a lot of series here that the showrunner stayed in LA, but
Mm,
we shot here. Uh, you know, I mean, with that being said, I think with ultimately with volume, you're going to start sort of getting the one that decides or gets convinced that they want to work here for post. You know, whether it's dollars or whether it's talent or whatever it is. And ultimately, again, like I don't think it's going to be full scale. I don't think all the shows are going to shoot all the studio lots are going to post here.
mhm.
I just don't, you know, just generally speaking. Oh, I think I think one of the problems is historically there's not enough editors in New York. There haven't been for a long time. So there was never enough sort of editors to really meet the needs of the various content people from LA making their content. Especially as you get into series, you know, your you know multi-editor scenario stuff. But that being said, again, over time, absolutely. I mean, again, I don't have a crystal ball to figure out exactly sort of what percentage, but I think it's without a question that's going to happen.
I mean, yeah, we hope so. It's not really a build it and they will come thing, but hopefully whoever built all these studios did some market research and made a calculated bet, and hopefully it's not overexpansion. Yeah, Wildflower is also there. Um, well, you guys, I'm so happy that you came to have this conversation with me. We'll continue the conversation. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions, but I didn't want to end on a sad note. And so that is where we're going to leave it. I feel optimistic, especially having all of you PNYA members and friends as part of this industry. How can we go wrong? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take
Bye bye,
care.
everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Bye.
cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.